Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host, Flavia Barris, as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media, including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur.
Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to meet Jay Connor. He has been buying and selling houses since 2003 in a population of only 40,000 people, with profits now averaging $82,000 per deal. He has rehabbed over 500 houses and been involved in over $118 million in transactions. Jay has completely automated his annual seven-figure income business to where now he works less than 10 hours per week in his buying and selling houses business. His passion is motivating and teaching other real estate investors how they too can raise private money without ever asking for money. As a result, Jay has consulted one-on-one with over 2,000 real estate investors. When he lost his lines of credit at the bank in 2009, and that was a terrible time in real estate, he raised $2.1 million in private money in less than 90 days. So that's when he was cut off from banks. I'm very curious to hear more about that. He's now a two-time national best-selling author. He's a national speaker on the topics of private money, foreclosures on this side of COVID, business automation, and personal development. He also hosts the Raising Private Money podcast. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Flavia, thank you so much for inviting me to come along to talk about my most passionate topic, that being private money, because private money has had more of an impact on mine and my wife, Carol Joy's real estate investing business than any other strategy that we've employed. You know, the two biggest questions I hear in real estate from particularly new real estate investors is, how do I find the deals and how do I fund the deals? And so here in this episode with you, Flavia, we're talking about how to get the money for real estate deals without ever asking for money.
I love it. And I think you're right. Those are the two big questions. How do I do this? How do I fund it? But how did you get into real estate? I'm always curious how people get pulled in a direction and then, especially in your circumstance, right? You've achieved all this success in real estate. How did you kick that off?
Well, I was actually raised by my father, Wallace Connor, who was in the housing industry for decades and decades. His company was the largest retailer of mobile homes or manufactured housing in 1988, that far back. And so I was raised in an environment of learning how to help other families get and own affordable housing. And so that industry and the financing for the consumer of that product virtually went away in 2003. So I knew if I ever got out of mobile homes, manufactured housing that I had been raised in, that I wanted to get into single family houses. And so in 2003, my wife, Carol Joy, and I started this buying and selling house business here in Eastern North Carolina. Our total population or target market that we invest in is only 40,000 people. We do 2 to 3 deals a month, flips, that is. Average profits now are 82,000. I don't share any of those stats to brag or pat myself on the back at all. The reason I share that or those statistics is to make a point, and that is there's a case to be made that it's a lot better to invest in a smaller area out in the suburbs, smaller population. I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond and actually dominate the market. So I know that my company, we are buying and investing in most of the best deals here in our local area. So anyway, we started investing in single family houses. And from 2003, Flavia, until 2009, January 2009, those first 6 years, all I knew to do as far as getting our funding for our real estate deals was to go to the local bank get on my hands and knees, put my hands underneath my chin and say, please fund my deal, and have to supply my tax returns and raise up my skirt so the banker can look at my personal assets and provide tax returns and credit scores and all that stuff. Well, that worked okay for the first 6 years. But then, Flavia, something happened in January 2009, 6 years into this business. I called up my banker. His name was Steve. He'd been my banker for 6 years. And I told Steve about 2 houses that I had under contract to purchase. And I thought, Flavia, I still had a line of credit at the bank. Anyway, told him about these 2 deals. Well, Steve told me over the phone that, Jay, he says, we're not loaning money out to real estate investors anymore. I said, Steve, why are you not loaning money out anymore? And why are you telling me I've lost my line of credit with no notice? And Steve said, Jay, don't you know there's a global financial crisis going on right now? I said, no, but you just gave me a global financial crisis. I don't have a way to fund my 2 deals that are under contract. So, Flavia, I hung up the phone and I sat here at my desk for a moment and I asked myself a very, very important question. And the question I asked myself was, I said, Jay, who do you know that can help you with your problem? And by the way, these people going around saying every problem's an opportunity, I want to throw up. I didn't have an opportunity. I had a problem. Now, that problem became a huge opportunity because, quite frankly, you and I wouldn't be here on your show today without that problem. But nonetheless, I needed a solution to my problem. So I asked myself that very powerful question. And this question will help anyone fix any problem they have. Relationships, career, financial, health, it doesn't matter. Ask yourself the question, who do you know that can help you with your problem? Well, when I asked myself that question, I immediately thought of my good friend, Jeff Blankenship, who lived in Greensboro, North Carolina at the time. And we know each other through church and gospel singings and a cappella singing and all that kind of stuff. In fact, we just saw Jeff and his wife 3 weeks ago here at a gospel a cappella singing in Eastern North Carolina. Anyway, I called up Jeff. He was investing in real estate back in 2009. And I told him what had happened with getting cut off at the bank. I said, Jeff, how are you funding your deals? He said, well, Jay, have you ever heard of private lenders and private money and how individuals can loan you money and invest in your deals and earn high rates of return safely and securely? I said, no. He said, well, have you ever heard of self-directed IRAs and how what's called a third-party custodian can actually house people's retirement funds, and they can loan their retirement money out to you on your real estate deals, and they can earn tax-free or tax-deferred income? I said, Jeff, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I knew Jeff had told me something. So I hung up the phone, and Flavia, I studied private money, private lending, what it is, where to find these people. And in less than 90 days, I was able to raise $2,150,000. And again, I don't share that to brag. What I'm sharing here is that I went about it, and I still go about it today without ever asking anybody for money. And what do? Instead of applying for a mortgage, I simply offer the program, offer the mortgages without having to beg, chase, persuade, sell, try to talk anybody into anything. So today, I've got 47 private lenders, individuals that are funding our deals. Not one of them had ever heard of private money or private lending until I taught them about it. See, that's the big secret. Lead with a servant's heart. We're not asking for money. We're teaching people about this opportunity. And none of these 47 private lenders that I have today had ever heard of private money. They never heard of self-directed IRAs and how they can use their retirement funds. So it's all about leading with teaching, not asking, begging, or chasing. You're just simply offering the opportunity. And I'll tell you a big secret, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Flavia. A big secret on getting money raised is separating the conversations between offering the opportunity and teaching somebody about how they can become a private lender, and then actually having a deal for them to fund. Because you see, if I talk about private money and the opportunity at the same time in the initial conversation with having a deal for them to fund, number one, I ask them to make too many decisions. And number two, and here's a writer downer, quote unquote, Jay Conner said it, desperation's got a smell to it. So the worst time to be raising private money for your real estate deals is when you need it for a deal. So we simply teach, educate. They let us know how much they've got to work with. If they have retirement funds, we introduce them to a self-directed IRA company that they can move their funds over to. Then we call them up with the good news phone call and have a deal for them to fund. And they fund the deal without me even asking. There's 4 things I tell people when I've got a deal for them to fund. And here it is. I call them up. I say, I got great news for you. I can now put your money to work. I got a house in Newport with an after repaired value of $200,000. The funding required for it is $150,000. I know that matches up to the funds that you told me you have. Closing is going to be next Friday. Need to have your funds wired to my real estate attorney's trust account by next Thursday. And I'm going to have my real estate attorney email you the wiring instructions. That's the end of the conversation. The most stupid thing I could ask my private lender is, do you want to fund the deal? Well, of course they want to fund the deal. They've been waiting for the good news phone call. They already know the program. I'm not going to bring a deal for them to fund unless it matches the criteria of the program. So again, it's all about owning that real estate between your ears before you try to own any real estate, because it's all about teaching people and offering them opportunities. No chasing, no begging, no selling, no persuading. I'd much rather have money chase me than me chasing money.
And so go a little bit into what a self-directed IRA is. I know there's people listening who may have not heard of this. In fact, there was a time you hadn't heard of it. And, you grew up in sort of the real estate world. And I do know a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear your sort of overview, just the 101 basics, so that people can understand what it is.
Sure. So a self-directed IRA, and by the way, you're right, Flavia, I never heard of self-directed IRA companies until February of 2009, when I first started digging into private money. But a self-directed IRA company, also known as a third-party custodian, is a company that is approved by the IRS. And their function is not to give financial advice. They can't give any financial advice. All they can be is a custodian of an individual's retirement funds. Now, most people starting out using retirement self-directed IRA companies, they'll take an existing retirement fund that they're not happy with. They may have a 401k at a previous employer, and it's still there with that administrator, and they haven't moved those retirement funds out. Or they may have retirement funds in a traditional stock brokerage, such as Charles Schwab, Morgan Stanley, etc. And perhaps they're not happy with the volatility of the stock market or whatever. So they can take those dedicated retirement funds, and they can, without any tax effect, no penalties, they can transfer those funds over to an IRS-approved self-directed IRA company. And it normally takes about 2 weeks to get those funds moved over. In fact, most self-directed IRA companies will actually move those funds for the client. And once their account is funded, now they can take those retirement funds. They can be a private lender, loan those monies out, loan those funds out to a real estate investor or entrepreneur, invest in deals. There's all kinds of things they can do with that money. They can actually be a real estate investor themselves and take retirement funds and invest in real estate, and all the profit that comes back into their retirement account from the profit is either tax-free or tax-deferred, depending on the type of retirement account that they've got.
And so these projects you work on, at one point you said the word flip, you call these properties projects. Give us the overview, the 101 on what it is that you personally do in the real estate world today.
Sure. So today, what I'm primarily doing are single family flips, where we buy the property, we use private money to fund it, Most of the properties we buy do need some renovation, anywhere from 20,000 to 60 or 70,000, depending on the project. All that's funded with private money, taking none of my own money to the closing table. And typically our hold time is 9 months. The reason for that is we've got so many projects and deals going. That house, from the time we buy it, could sit there without any renovation being done to it for 2 or 3 months. Then the average renovation is going to take 3 months or so. So now we've had it 6 months. Then we'll put it on the market, and then we'll typically close and cash out within 45 to 60 days after that. Now, I still do what I call terms deals. We'll buy single family houses on terms, meaning either the seller of the property will give us a carryback and they be the bank and we make payments to them, or we'll buy what's called subject to the existing note, where they transfer ownership to us. They agree to leave the mortgage in their name and we agree to make their payments. If there are past due on payments, such as a foreclosure, we'll bring their payments current. And then typically when we buy a house on terms, we'll turn around and sell it on terms, meaning typically on lease purchase or rent to own, to a end buyer, and then we help them get ready for a mortgage, and then everybody gets cashed out.
Amazing. And so you've picked a market that you knew very well. What advice would you have for a real estate investor who's thinking they want to do something like this, but they don't know where?
As far as which market?
Yes. You mentioned that being out maybe in a suburban market, in a smaller area, but what kind of population count do you look for when you're advising people on which market to approach? I'm sure yours isn't the only one out there that has opportunities and would be a good market to do this kind of work in. But should people also look at big cities? Should they look at rural areas? Where are the best places to do these kinds of flips and renovation type investments in the country?
Great question. I don't recommend the big cities because you've already got all that competition there in the big cities. I'd rather, again, as I said, be a big fish in a small pond, and I'd rather dominate the market. So I'd say not rural areas, because with rural areas, you may go a mile or two before you see a house. Well, that's hard to get comps, sold comps, when you go to sell, or even to know the value when you buy. So I want houses to be around houses. My rule of thumb is I want the occupant of that home to be able to get to a Walmart, or at least to eggs and milk and bread, within 5 to 10 minutes of the home. Otherwise, you're going to lose a pool of buyers that want to live that far out. But I definitely recommend, I'm in the 40,000. I would say the ideal would be 100,000 people, 100,000 population. Another rule of thumb I have, particularly when you're starting out, if you can't drive by the property and see it yourself before purchasing and then during the process of getting it ready for sale, don't do it. I want to be able to drive by and look at my properties and not rely on pictures and that type of thing.
Great advice. You've written books. I love speaking to people who have sort of achieved that very difficult goal of getting thought on paper, publishing books, getting your expertise out in the world in that format. Was that difficult for you, or are you kind of a born writer? And when did you decide to publish books, and how did your process go?
Well, it was very difficult for me. It took me 3 years to finish my first book. By the way, don't let that be a discouragement to anyone that's listening to this show. I won the award on procrastination on that. When I really set my mind to it, I was able to finish it within 2 months. So I waited too long. I really waited too long to publish and be an author. Because, first of all, when you're an author and you know what you're talking about, your credibility just goes through the ceiling. In fact, after I became a published author, when people would ask me, what do you do? I just say, well, I'm an author. Well, doesn't that open up conversation right there? Oh, you're an author. Well, what do you write about? Oh, well, I write about private money and how private lenders can make high rates of return and how to get your real estate deal. So it just opens up conversations. So I agree with you, Flavia. I believe any entrepreneur, anyone that's got expertise, write a book I mean, you don't even have to start out with a full book being published. I mean, start out by writing, an electronic book that, you can offer to your friends on Facebook and et cetera. There's so many benefits to having your own book. And the first one is when you write your own book, even if it's an electronic book or pamphlet, when you write that, you're going to know your stuff, because unless you can articulate it and you can put it in writing, you really don't understand it. And of course, when you're writing a book, you are a teacher, right? Your book, you're teaching people what it is that you have an expertise in. And when you teach something, you actually become so much better at what you're teaching yourself.
When the procrastination was over, how was it that you could get yourself to be motivated, to stay on task? Do you have any tips or hacks for people that are on that same procrastination wave that want to get off that?
Yes. I hired a dear friend of mine who is an excellent writer. And I hired him up. His name's David. I said, David, I need you to hold my feet to the fire, and we got to get this thing finished. So we had, and here's a writer downer, we had a weekly meeting every week, same time, same day. And we caught up each other on the progress of the book. And before we got off of that 30-minute call, I promised what I was going to get finished by the following week. And during that week, he was editing what I had just written. So accountability, weekly meeting, and get you a good editor.
And you also started a podcast. So tell us a little bit about your podcast. Is it interview-based? Is it more about you and your expertise? What kinds of topics do you talk about?
Sure. Thank you for asking. Well, the name of my podcast is Raising Private Money with Jay Conner. So whatever your favorite podcast platform is, just search for Raising Private Money and you'll find it very, very easily. I'm in my 8th year right now, and we have over 700, maybe 800 episodes. And most of the time what I'm doing is I'm interviewing people that have been very successful at raising private money for their own deals, their real estate deals, raising money for capital ventures, for starting up a business. So I interview those individuals and we really dive deep, step by step. How do they have gone about raising private money? How do they find people to talk to? What is their scripting that they use? What are the mistakes that they've made in raising funding for their business? So yes, it's primarily interview based, where I'm diving deep with my guest on how they have gone about raising private money.
And you're not just an expert on raising financing and real estate, but you also teach business automation. I'm interested in that because I know you're now working less than 10 hours a week on your business, but your business is the kind that I know there's people out there who would spend 90 hours a week doing the same kinds of things you do. So go a little bit into that. How do you maintain so much white space on your calendar, and how have you developed automation hacks or techniques to help you in that?
Well, I assure you, Fabia, it didn't start out this way. When I started this in 2003, Carol Joy and I, we were running around with our hair on fire, doing everything. Now, we weren't doing the rehabbed. I mean, I don't even know how to hold a hammer. I mean, we were subbing that out. But, all the marketing and the operational aspects and check writing and all that for the business. But a year into this, I came around the corner one evening at 10 o'clock in our home, and I saw my wife, Carol Joy, very upset and crying. And I asked her, what's the matter? And she says, I can't handle this anymore. I can't take it. And I had a wake-up call that night. We were netting over $1 million a year that first year doing this. But the lesson I learned is you can be making all the money in the world, but it's not worth the journey if your business is running you instead of you running it. So I set out on a mission over the next year to automate everything that I do. So how did I go about that? I started categorizing and logging every task and every activity that I did. And Carol Joy did the same thing. And so I set out on a mission, and I call it the 3D mission, which stands for dictate, delegate, and disappear. Dictate, delegate, disappear. So what is automation? Automation is delegating tasks out that you do either to technology, software, and people on your team. So, for example, how do we save time in the business? Well, I have proprietary software that my acquisitionist, well, what in the world is an acquisitionist? An acquisitionist is a person that talks to motivated sellers of houses. Therefore, she's an acquisitionist. She negotiates the acquisition, if you will, of that property. I got the same acquisitionist now for 19 years. So my acquisitionist, her name is Kim. We use the same software to communicate with each other as far as what stage in the pipeline of that deal is it? Did it just come in from one of our lead sources? Has the acquisitionist Kim talked to them? Have I reviewed the numbers? Does it make sense for the team to go look at the property and estimate repairs? What's my offer? Well, my acquisitionist and I, we never talk. I did call and wish her happy Thanksgiving not too long ago, but I mean, as far as business, it's all communicated in the software. So we save hours and hours and hours of time simply by keeping notes in that software. I have a full-time lead manager, and Trixie's been with me for 6 years, and her job is to make sure no leads fall through the crack, and making sure that we don't lose any of the leads and everybody's being followed up with. And then I have virtual assistants that save me time and money on automating the business. I have a virtual assistant that is in charge of Facebook ads, posting Facebook ads looking for motivated sellers. I have another virtual assistant that is an outbound caller. And so she calls on the phone every day, Monday through Friday, potential motivated sellers. So we have these virtual assistants, we got the software, we got the team. And so the key to automation here is actually the less number of tasks that I personally do, and the more I get out of the way, actually, the more money I make. When I started out automating and delegating, I thought nobody else could do what I did as good as I can. And to my surprise, most of my team, with what they do it actually better than I could do it. So get your team in place, put your checks and balances in place, and you run your business and don't let your business run you.
I love it. We always ask our guests here on the show if there's any kind of freebie, something of value, something that's maybe a resource or something else that guests can benefit from. And you have a great offer. It's for your book, but I'll let you go into it and describe the book. I think that's a very generous offer, and I thank you in advance. So tell us a little bit about which of your books they would get.
Yes. So let me recommend my most recent book, which is called Where to Get the Money Now. Where to Get the Money Now. The subtitle is How and Where to Get Money for Your Real Estate Deals Without Relying on Traditional or Hard Money Lenders. So this is not an ebook. This is an actual book. You can get it on Amazon for $20, but free is better, FREE. I will autograph this book for you and ship it 3-day express mail. And all you got to do is just cover shipping. And the book really goes into very easy to understand, step-by-step on how to find these private lenders. I actually have in the book the program that I offer my private lenders that you can duplicate. So you can get this book at www.jayconner.com/book. Again, that's jayconner.com/book, and I'll autograph it and rush it right out to you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And we also always duplicate all of our guests' offers in podcastguestgift.com. That's our vault where we keep all of our guest offers. So that's podcastguestgift.com. We are so excited to have had you on the show today. I think this is one of those eye-opening episodes where a lot of people learned a lot. Maybe they'd never heard of private money, or that you are allowed to do different things with your retirement account other than just investing it in a mutual fund or the stock market, or kind of the sort of plain vanilla, boring ways to invest. There's ways to be a little bit more, I think self-directed is a great word for it, because it's a little, you have more direction. You can actually decide what kind of investment your money's going to go into, and it's still there growing for retirement. So it really does seem like a win-win. Jay, any final thoughts to motivate people to move forward to achieve their own goals before we say goodbye today?
Yes, thank you for asking, Flavia. I had the blessing and the privilege of meeting in person John Maxwell just a few weeks ago. Had a great chat with him. He was the keynote speaker for our mastermind group. And when it was opened up to Q&A, a lady in the audience asked John Maxwell, said, "What's the one attribute or characteristic you have that you would attribute to so much success that you've had?" And he says, that answer is easy. He says, "I just fail more than other people." And he went on to explain what that means. He says, the average person out there, they try 10 things, probably going to fail 7 times, but they got 3 wins. He says, while they're trying 10 new things, I'm trying 100 new things, which means I may fail 70 times, but I got 30 wins. And so he followed that up with a question. And he says, here's the question to ask yourself. When's the last time you did something new for the first time? Start taking action quicker, sooner, and now.
Amazing advice. Jay, it's been such a pleasure today. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your expertise and your motivation.
Flavia, thank you for having me. God bless you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness. But money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use a coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.